I think this is class 19 or 20, Shi'ur, number 20 on Masechet Ketuvot, but the title will have the correct number. I wanted to refine some of the things I said in the previous Shi'ur. I listened to the class. I was not satisfied with some of the points. I didn't think they came out clearly, so I wanted to give this interim class. And just, by way of a summary of the sugya starts with the petiha. It starts in Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. There's a petiha, or an introduction. Amarav Shemuel bar Yitzchak Amarav, right? And then that kind of introduces the discussion. And then we have Chelik Aleph. Chelik Aleph is the first beraita. The first beraita is the Tosefta in Masechet Ketuvot, Mipnei Ma Amru. Right? And then they say, well, if it's Wednesday, why can't it be Sunday? Right? We study this. And then they say Shakedu. So that's a beraita of Shakedu, right? On the beraita of Shakedu, the beraita itself has 5 parts. Then we have 5 comments on the law of sakana. We have 5 comments on sakana, my sakana. Then we have 5 comments on my ones. Okay, that's for the first part. Okay, then Chelik Bet is beraita Bet. Beraita Bet is the beraita of avilut, right? It's broad because it wants to explain what ones is, and the idea is that the ones mentioned in the first beraita was avilut. So we have the second beraita which explains the idea of ones. That beraita also has 5 parts. On that beraita, on that second beraita, we have 5 comments regarding Natan Ma'im al Gabei Basar. Then we have what I believe is Chelik Gimel. So Chelik Gimel is the beraita on right, because we said Tanaka v'tedrav Chisala Chisase Natan Ma'im al Gabei Basar, and then we bring a beraita that has explicitly Natan Ma'im al Gabei Basar. It's very similar to beraita Gimel. It's almost identical to, or very similar to, a beraita Bet, but it has a few additional details. One of the additional details is Natan Ma'im al Gabei Basar. So this Chelik Gimel, this beraita actually has 7 parts. We have an interpolation. The interpolation being the comment Messiah Rabbi Yohanan. So after the beraita, we make a comment that this beraita seems to support Rabbi Yohanan. That's parallel to Vedavka Aviv Shel Hatan Oima Shel Kala. You remember after the second beraita we brought a comment Vedavka Aviv Shel Hatan Oima Shel Kala, which appears to be a Sephardic comment, or maybe not, but it's an interpolation into the sugya, right? So here we have a similar interpretation. Then so that beraita, as we said, has 7 parts. Then we have the Derasha of Rav Yosef. This is the second subpart of this third part. The first subpart being the beraita itself. The second which was divided into 7 parts. The second subpart has the Derasha of Rav Yosef, followed by 7 questions. And then the third subpart is Yeshivat Surah's analysis, which was different than the analysis presented here, which we're going to be reading now. But the point is that I want to read, so now you have kind of like a structure. So again, part Chelik Aleph, 5, 5, and 5. Beraita Aleph, 5, 5, and 5. Chelik Bet, Beraita Bet, 5 and 5. Beraita Gimel, Chelik Gimel, 7 and 7, right? And then we have the final subpart of Chelik Gimel, which is the explanation of Rav Asher, which is a completely different direction. Okay, so we're gonna explain these things, but in the meantime, I just want to give you the basic structure of the sugya, and then you're gonna have Chelik Daled, which would be an analysis of the second beraita, because the second beraita brought the question of Bo'el Beilat Misal Foresh, but you can't be Bo'el on Shabbat, right? So we'll deal with that later. Okay, so you have now a better sense of the structure. let's read now, because as I said, I want to refine some of the points. Darash Rav Yosef, Bered Rabba, Mishemed Rabba, Lo Shanu. Now, when he says Lo Shanu here, he's not referring to the Baraita. It can't be referring to the Baraita because later on the Gemara says V'ha'acha, but in our Baraita it says this. So Rabbi Yosef Bered Rabba. Rabbi Yosef Bered Rabba couldn't have been referring to our Baraita, but he says Lo Shanu. So apparently there was the law. He was dealing with the law that if a hatan now enters the house with his kalla, and it ends up shepirsanida, that they have to have shomerim. Okay, on that law says Rabbi Yosef Bered Rabba, of course not the famous Rabbi Yosef, Lo Shanu ela shelo ba'al. When do we say that hu yoshen ben ha'anashim vehi yeshena ben ha'anashim? If he didn't have the opportunity to be with her. Aval ba'al ishto yeshena imo. Okay. On that, now the Gemara says v'ha'acha. The Gemara is a question. But in our Beraita, the Ba'al sekinan. Our Beraita was dealing with the situation where Ba'al, because we said bo'el beilat misvah uforesh, right? And then we said hu yoshem ben hanashim ve'ishto yeshena ben hanashim, meaning after bo'el beilat misvah hu yoshem ben hanashim ve'yeshena ben hanashim. So you understand the question? V'ha'achad ba'al sekinan v'kataneh hu yoshem ben hanashim ve'yeshena ben hanashim. In our Beraita, he was bo'el, and yet the law of shomerim applies. So how can Rabbi Yosef Bered Rabba say that the law of shomerim doesn't apply if im ba'al? It only applies im lo ba'al. Ki ka'ama apirsa ishto nida. So the Hachamim answer no. Rabbi Yosef Bered Rabba was dealing with a situation when pirsa ishto nida. Not with the situation of the avelut, right? Mishemet aviv shel hatan or ima shel kala, right? Bo'el bela misvah uforesh. Rabbi Yosef was dealing with the issue of misha pirsa ishto nida, not with the issue of mishemet aviv shel hatan or ima shel kala, that bo'el bela misvah uforesh, right? V'chen kataneh. So they say, but our Beraita is also dealing with the situation of Misha Precise Tonida. It says V'chen, Misha Precise Tonida. And when you say the word V'chen, the meaning of V'chen is the aforementioned law, namely, what was the aforementioned law? Hu Yoshen ben ha'anashim ve'yeshena ben ha'anashim applies to the following. V'chen, Misha Precise Tonida. So it comes out that according to the Baraita, Misha Precise Tonida, the aforementioned law of Hu Yoshen ben ha'anashim ve'yeshena ben ha'anashim af al pi she'ba'al, that law applies to Misha Precise Tonida. But Rabbi Yosef just said that no, Misha Precise Tonida, it depends whether Ba'al or no Ba'al. So again, how can Rabbi Yosef say that? V'chen kataneh, achi ka'amar, v'chen Misha Pirsa ishto nida ve'lo ba'al hu yoshen ben ha'anashim ve'ishto yeshena ben ha'anashim. So achi ka'amar, the Baraita, when the Baraita says v'chen Misha Pirsa ishto nida, the Baraita was talking that v'chen didn't mean similarity in law, because v'chen usually means similarity in law. The same way the law like that is in case A, v'chen case B, the law is like that. Here, v'chen means that the result is the same, right? That the only two cases where you would have Hu Yoshen ben ha'anashim ve'yeshena ben ha'anashim is A, sheba'al beilat misvah, and then noek shivat yemei mishteh v'shivat yemei avelut. B, Misha Precise Tonida, but not under all circumstances of Precise Tonida, only im lo ba'al. And that's the point of Rabbi Yosef. Okay. Lememra the avilut kilale minita. So the Gemara now says, can we therefore reach the conclusion that avilut in the mind of the Baal is not to be taken as seriously as the laws of Nida? That if you take the laws of Nida seriously, of course, it's karet. Avilut, he wouldn't take so seriously. Why? Because you're saying that in the case of avilut, we have to separate them, whether precise Nida or no precise Nida. In the case of a regular, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Let me repeat that. You're saying that in the case of avilut, you have to separate them, whether Baal or lo Baal. That's what I meant to say. But in the case of precise Nida, only im lo Baal, you separate them. In Baal, you don't separate them. So you see here that psychologically, the state of mind of the husband is, I'm not going to make an avera, but minan, hayav karet. So, okay, in lo Baal, maybe the Yetzirah would be mitgaber, lo Baal. But in Baal, that's it. Boom. So you're not going to do anything. You're not going to like in your mind, it's like, boom, that's it. You know, I can control myself, right? Baal. In the case of avilut, apparently, he won't take it too seriously because we're saying separate them, whether Baal or lo Baal. You understand? Rabbi Yitzhak bar Chanina was the Talmid of Rav Huna. He studied with him in Yeshivat Surah. Why is it called Rabbi Yitzhak bar Chanina? I suspect, but I don't have any evidence for this, other than the fact that it's called Rabbi. Apparently, it was a Talmid of Rabbi Yochanan, Sheni Smach al Rabbi Yochanan, and probably he went to Bavel afterwards and studied with Rav Huna. That's my understanding. Otherwise, how can it be Rabbi Yitzhak? Right? And that's why it be, because it's Smach be'eretz Yisrael. Okay. כל מלאכות שאישה עושה לבעלה, נידה עושה לבעלה. חוץ ממזיגת הכוס ועשת המיטה ולחיסת פניו ידיו ורגליו. Okay, so we have the statement of Rabbi Yitzhak bar Chanina in the name of Rav Huna, that a woman who is nida may not do these three works for her husband. But when it comes to avilut, there's a baraita that says, אף על פי שאמרו, אין אדם רשאי לקוף את אשתו להיות כוחלת ולהיות פוקסת, באמת אמרו מוזגת לו הכוס. And here we see that in the case of avilut, we allow the wife to attend to her husband's needs, including mezigat hakos, including hasat hamita, including reisat panav yadav v'raglav. So if you said that avilut is kilale in the mind of the husband, they should have forbidden him from being mozeket loit, or forbidden her from being mozeket loit hakos. Right? Kilale, right? So you're saying in the case of Nida, we make this extra halakha, implying what? That it's hamur. I'm sorry, implying that in his mind it's kal. In his mind it's kal, and therefore if you don't do these halakot, but minan, he might be with her, that's why you have to do these halakot. But in the case of avilut, she's allowed to do these three things. Why? Obviously in his mind, avilut is avilut, he's not going to do anything, right? And therefore, we can allow the leniency of allowing her to attend to his needs in this situation. So, from the analysis of our baraita, that we wanted to distinguish based on Rabbah, Bered Rav Yosef, we wanted to distinguish between avilut on the one side and nida on the other side. The conclusion was that avilut is kilale and nida is hamurle or hamirale. In the case of what we see from the comparison of the statement of Rav Huna to the Baraita, it's the opposite. It appears like Nida is kilale and avilut is hamirale, right? La kashya kan be'avilut dide, kan be'avilut dide, kan be'avilut dida. They say no. In avilut dide is different than avilut dida. When we said in the Baraita that in Adam Rashai Lakof et Ishto, that's because she's in Avela, right? She is Avela. And therefore we can allow the situation of her being Mozeket Lo Hakos. He's not going to try to start up with her. She's Avela, and he understands she's Avela, and he didn't lose his mind. He's not going to try to, convince her to be with him, right? When she's avela. But if he's the avel, he's like, you might consider it. So when it says in Baraita number 3, right, Tanakavet Rav Chisda, that Hu Yoshem ben Anashim ve'yeshna ben Anashim, which is a big Humra in Avelut, which shows that in his mind Avelut is Kal. That's because it's his Avelut, and he would be Mekel in his Avelut. You understand the point? So let's just summarize that again. Our Beraita, I'm sorry, the Beraita in Daf Daled Amud Aleph, Beraita Gimel, right? Tanaka v'ted Rav Chisda, Hu Yoshem ben Anashim ve'yeshna ben Anashim. That Beraita was dealing with the situation where he's the Avel. Since he's the Avel, in his mind he might be Mekel. And that's where the Hachamim said, whoa, hold on one second. You can't be together. Afal Pisha you can't be together. Okay. In the case of the Baraita that we brought now, Be'emet Amrum, Mozeket lo hakol sumasat lo hamidam veroches lo panav beraglav. In that Baraita, she's Avela. And he doesn't need any hakol because he knows to stay away from her. Right? So of course the obvious question is, but the Baraita started met aviv shel hatan or met imma shel kala. It says that it applies whether he's the avel or whether she's the avela, right? So how can you say it applies only when he's avel? No. The Baraita, the answer of the Gemara is, when does it say met aviv shel hatan or imma shel kala? All these laws apply to them, both of them. But this one specific law of Hu Yashem ben Anashim, V'yeshna ben Anashim, only applies in a situation where he is the Avel. And therefore you need an extra harhaka. But if she was the Avela, you wouldn't need that harhaka. So now, the premise of this answer is that there's a difference between his Avelut, him being Avel and she being Avel, but we have a Baraita that says otherwise. והתניא, מי שמת חמיו או חמותו, אינו יכול לקוף את אשתו להיות כוחלת ולהיות פוקסת, אלא כופה מיתתו ונוהג עמה אבלות. וכן היא שמת חמיה או חמותה, אינה רשאה להיות כוחלת ולהיות פוקסת, אלא כופה מיתתה ונוהגת עמו אבלות. So here we have a Baraita that says explicitly that there is complete reciprocity and equality between husband and wife. If the husband is Avel, the wife does A, B, C for the husband. If the wife is Avela, the husband, same laws. Right? So there is no distinction between the Avelut of a husband and the Avelut of a wife. Right? Again, and the point of this lesson is this Baraita is coming to compare Avelut where the wife is Avela to Avelut where the husband is Avel. If there was a difference, the Baraita would have said so. Right? So there is no basis for us interpreting Baraita Gimel as applying only if he's Avel and not if she's Avela. Here we have a Baraita. Again, let's read the Baraita. Let me explain the Baraita. Mi shemet hamiv or hamoto. So it's now she's Avela. So number one, he can't force it to put on makeup. To do her hair, to build her hair, like to braid her hair. He has to turn his bed upside down, or the diwan upside down. I think we'll explain this maybe further in the next class. And he has to be avel with her. He has to be noheg avelut. That's halacha, right? He shemet hamiha or hamota. אינה רשאה להיות כוחלת ולא פוקסת. She can't put on makeup. אלא כופה מיתתה. ונוהגת עמו אבלות, right? So here we see there is no difference. Right? בין אבלות תדע ואבלות תדע. And therefore when it says, הוא יושם בין האנשים, ישנה בין האנשים, it should be to both of them, meaning irrespective of who's the avel. תנה, ואבלות תדע, הוא יושם בין האנשים, וישתה בין האנשים. So the Gemara says you should have a footnote. There should be a footnote on this beraita. This beraita that you just quoted should have a footnote. Tene should have a footnote. There is a difference, and the difference is in the case of his avelut versus her avelut. Avelut tideh, when he's avel, hu yoshem ben anashim yishta ben anashim, because he might decide, oh, it's not a big deal. I'm avel. I want to be with her, right? Right. Ha vechen kataneh. So the Gemara says, how can you have a footnote like that? The beraita itself says, if you look at the Shana beraita, mi shemet hamim o hamoto, etc. And then it says, vechen hi shemet hamia o hamota. Vechen means there's an equality. And now you want to introduce an inequality. How can you say that? Ki kataneh kechol ba'pirkus. So they say, no, the equality is with respect to the question of her putting on makeup and the other matters. It's not with respect to the issue of being together. But the Beraita says immo. She should be avel with him, or he should be avel with her. Veha immo kataneh, ma'elav immo b'mita, lo immo b'bayit. So immo suggests a certain intimacy. She should be avela with him, immo, right? Again, reading the Beraita. V'noheget immo avelut. What does it v'noheget immo avelut? That implies a certain intimacy, meaning she should be avela with him. Right? So again, the basis for saying there's a distinction between his avelut and her avelut, in saying that if it's his avelut, they have to be extra mahmirim, right? But immo means she's together with him in bed. They're allowed to be. They can be. They don't need chomerim, avel and avel, right? So according to this, you don't need chomerim. You understand? It's a subtle point. Again, veha immo kataneh. I'm going to read it again in the Beraita. It says vechen hi shemet hamia. The husband is avel. אינה רשאה להיות כוחלת ולהיות פוקסת, אלא כופה מיתתה ונוהגת עמו אבלות. She's with him. נוהגת עמו means she's with him, meaning together in the same bed, whatever the halakha is, but you can be with him in the same bed, right? והעמו קטנה, the אבלות, right? מה אליו עמו במיטה? So apparently the same bed, no? No. עמו בבית. They can be in the same room, but they need shomerim, right? So to summarize, she's immo babayit, and therefore, hu yashem ben anashim, bi yashna ben hanashim. But if she's avela, you don't need that. That's what it says. That's the way this. That's the way they understand this. סוגיה. וכתאמה לרב חייא ברה באפה נהוג אבלותו דלה באפה לה תנהוג אבלותה. I want to re-explain what I just said. Right. תנא באבלות תידה, הוא ישם בין האנשים ואשתו ישם בין האנשים. וכן קטנה, כי קטנה ככל בפרקוס, והאמו קטנה, מעלה בביתה. לה אמו בבית, וכתאמה לרב חייא ברה, באפה נהוג אבלותה. דלא באפה לה תנהוג אבלותה. Right? So, the lesson that Rav is teaching his son Rav חייא is that when you're with her, you have to feign avelut. You have to show avelut. When you're not with her, you don't have to show avelut. So what does it mean? So immo, right? Immo would necessarily mean. In fact, you know what? I'm going to explain this in the next class. But I just want you to see that this part of the sugya, because it is beginning to rain here, and I need to get inside. But this part of the sugya, it assumes that there is a difference between avelut ida and avelut ida, and that when it says hu yoshen ben ha'anashim V'yeshem ben hanashim, that's be'avilut tideh. But be'avilut tideh, you don't need that. And therefore, the lememra de avilut kila leminita, yes, avilut kila leminita, in his mind, if it's avilut tideh, right? We're gonna rediscuss this last point in the next class, but I have to get inside because it's raining. On that,